Hello, dear listeners. Today I have a very interesting guest to present to you and a talk I've been eager and very excited to have. I'm joined by Edi Bilimoria, an unusual blend of a person with professional experience in the fields of science and engineering, arts and philosophy. He has been studying, researching and writing on perennial philosophy for over half a century. And today we are here to talk about his monumental work, a series of 4 books, Unfolding Consciousness, for which he was also awarded the Scientific and Medical Network Grand Book Prize for 2022. So welcome and glad to have you, Edi.
Thank you so much, Remo. I'm very honored and very privileged to be talking to you
And me.
on a subject that fires both of us.
Yes, absolutely.
Great enthusiasm, right?
Yes, I've been reading some parts of your book and I've been struck by inspiration for the last 3 or 4 days. And in a sense, so many questions have opened up, but also so many, let's say, new synapses or connections between synapses have been made. So many new understandings, and it's just great to review or be the chance to look into material that is so deep and ancient. And I think, like, you make the metaphor of this tree of wisdom that the fruit it bears is always the same, no matter the era or time you're in, but it's always different as well. You know, it's still the same apple from the apple tree, but no apple is ever the same. And this is
beautifully put, Remo. Yes, that's Albert Schweitzer's description of perennialism. Yeah, it's the same fruit, but never quite the same. In other words, the fruit has to be adapted, modified, and put in a form and an idiom that is suitable for the age we live in.
Yes, and that's in mythology. It's also to rescue the dead water from the belly of the beast. Am I right?
Yeah. Yes, that's right.
Yeah. I first wanted to ask you, how are your feelings about the prize, the award?
Oh my goodness. Well, let's put it this way, Remo. It does nothing for one's ego, at least my ego. I'm very honored. It's wonderful to be appreciated. And it's, if I may say so, it's not the only prize I've received. Because my first book also got the prize. And seriously, it makes me want to work even harder to get the message across, to do service and justice to the perennial philosophy and to disseminate it. So it's really an encouragement and a sign that one is on the right track, and one should work ever harder and never rest on one's laurels, because there is no end of improvement, there's no end of progress, and it's only one small step along the road.
Wonderful. I'm happy that you feel this way. I would definitely like to look deeper into the work, but I guess we'll have a chance to do that today. And I also feel that one of the last, let's say, learnings for me has been that it's a quote, I'm not sure from who, but in creative work, we as humans, we don't need to, reinvent the wheel or always learn something new. Oftentimes we actually just need to be reminded of age-old truths, of what's really important. And I feel perennial philosophy is is perhaps the etalon or crystallization or essence of that, of what we need to be reminded again and again throughout times, whenever we are straying off the path.
Yes,
So,
indeed. The perennial philosophy, so to speak, is out of time, but the message has got to be put in time and space for the age we live in. It's perennial, so it's eternal. So it's outside time, but it expresses through time, if I can put it that way. And the expression through time is the form it takes. The content is always the same, but the form has to be adapted and varied. And that's what the great sages have done. The great sages of any age, East or West, ancient and modern, they've dipped their pen into the same inkwell, the same inkwell of the perennial philosophy, but they've written from that ink in their own handwriting, in the language, and according to the mentality of the epoch and age they lived in.
I love that metaphor, that the ink is the same, the truth is the same, but the angles, the understandings, the context is ever shifting. Yes. I'd like to dig deeper perhaps into your inspiration and into how it started for you, because I said it's you've been involved in this for over half a century, and I understand these books have been written for more than 2 decades, right? So what has been
True, yeah.
what has been your motivation, and how did this journey all begin for you?
2 decades indeed, but I'd say the last 80% was over the last 5 or 7 years, and a lot of that during the pandemic, actually. So the motivation is this. If one has an external motivation, as far as I'm concerned, that's not being very sincere. The motivation has got to be from within. So it's really a love of the subject. And therefore, if you love the subject as you love if you love a person or love anything, you want to express that love. So it's an expression of the love of the subject. And initially, just to use the example of the implicit and the explicit, my theme, my whole purpose was pretty implicit, but rolled inwards, in other words. But the more I was writing it, the more the objective and the purpose became very explicit and very objective, and I knew exactly why I was writing. Whereas when I started, it was more a feeling around the subject. So I can only relate it to any composer who writes a piece of music that often doesn't get played till well after their death. And obviously, many composers write to a commission, which they have to. But the greatest of music was written because the composer loved writing it. And they were dead well before it was performed. So the basic motivation was to disseminate this wisdom through a scientific idiom and drawing on the ancient and the eternal philosophy. Given my background in all those fields.
Yeah, it feels like, as much as I read it, feels like really like building bridges, between the ancient philosophers and modern, let's say, philosophers and scientists and physicists, and in this way, I guess it's a good company to be in. Am I right?
Well, I'm in very good company.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Just in terms of the central purpose was to show that the universe, man, matter, everything is guided by intelligence at all levels. And nature is anything but blind and mechanical, that there is intelligence at all levels, and the laws of nature are the expression of intelligences and not blind forces in matter.
That everything is alive, can I put it this way?
Everything is alive at its level, at its own level. Yeah. And just because we can't see the indwelling life, we have no right to say there isn't life.
Did you even go further back? How did you, stumble upon this field? How did you stumble upon perennial philosophy? Does it have to do something with your roots in India or your uprising, or did you just find a book?
All of that. But you only find the book that you are looking for. David Lorimer, a long time ago, he had a very good sort of analogy that if you're looking to find a Volkswagen Beetle, you will see many Volkswagen Beetles on the road that you never saw before, because you brought that thought into your mind and then you resonate. But okay, talking of my roots and background very briefly, I was born in India, into the Parsi Zoroastrian religion. So my raw material is from the East. I came to England at the age of 13, so I was manufactured in the West and went to 3 universities in England, studying science and engineering. At the same time, I was studying music at the Trinity College of Music part-time in London. Then I always had this intuition that there is far more to life than what the physical eye sees and what science tells us. And the whole point for saying this is in the book. So I emphasized in no uncertain terms, we are indebted to science, and I really mean that, indebted. But science does not go sufficiently deep and far enough to answer the most profound and deep questions about life. So when I was writing my PhD at Sussex University, just to make life even harder for myself, I embarked on a full course on astrology, which a lot of scientists talk rubbish about because they've never sort of gone into it. And the ones that do go into it don't talk rubbish about it and keep their mouth shut until they meet the right people to talk to. So again, studying astrology opened my eyes that there are influences, there are correlations, there are forces that are above and beyond a conventional scientific explanation. And that led me then to the Theosophical Society. And then you said earlier, did you read a book? I visited the Theosophical Society bookshop in those days in front of the British Museum. And yes, I bought a book, The Key to Theosophy by Blavatsky. And that again opened a huge vista, which again, using the implicit-explicit sort of way of looking at it, it opened that which was within me, but I only unconsciously knew about it. But then reading these things made it more explicit and more objective and unfolded it outwards for me. So then I was very, very heavily involved with the Theosophical Society, and a little later on with the Scientific Medical Network. Very quickly, the Theosophical Society, I mean, one can say so much about it, but what was its purpose? One of the well-known sayings by the great adepts was, between religious superstition, degrading religious superstition, and even more degrading, brutal scientific materialism, the white dove of truth knows not where to put her weary and unwelcome foot. So during that time in the 19th century, and then there's so much religious superstition and scientific materialism, where is the truth? And the whole, the point of the Theosophical Society was to show where the white dove of truth could put her weary, unwelcome foot, for which there had to be quite an outpouring of occult science, the invisible science, only a small portion of it. But I must emphasize the Theosophical Society is not a hall of occultism. The central purpose was to inculcate a real brotherhood of humanity, but that could only be done by showing humanity's common origin and roots. As the great sages have always pointed out, but that could not be done without revealing some of the invisible laws behind the universe and behind man, in other words, occult science. But occult science is not the main purpose of the Theosophical Society. It is the means to realize the basic common heritage, the common understanding of humanity and the universe.
There's so much I
And one of
resonate
the
with.
most important things that was emphasized in the Theosophical Society is the importance of science. There is a great saying, science is our best ally. In other words, the ancient means eternal. It doesn't mean just age old, therefore not modern. The ancient means eternal. The eternal truths disseminated by the sages would, in the fullness of time, find their justification and corroboration through modern science. And a very, very good example, a wonderful example, is quantum physics, which has shown the infinite divisibility of the atom, which was once thought to be impenetrable and undivided, not divisible.
Well, there's two ways we could go here. First, I want to say I really resonate with this, like you said, implicit feeling or intuition that the world is so much more than physical. This is exactly how I have felt from when I was very little, and when I've described myself to someone in this regard, I've said that I'm one of the faulty kids who never refused to give up on magic, who never stopped believing in magic.
Yes, sir.
And
if you stop believing in magic, you've stopped believing in the mystery and the miracle and the beauty of the world. And
yes. And another point you made was that, that some scientists, well, let's say materialists, claim that, the world is just matter. But, that even that claim itself is so absurd. It's like, you're saying it's just matter. What do you mean just matter? Are you saying that we understand matter? Are you saying that matter isn't utterly mysterious? That we have somehow, put the dot in the scientific investigation into matter? Like, even if we say that the world is just matter, then what are we really saying? Because matter itself is utterly mysterious and by no means, finally revealed of what it is, and exactly like you're saying in quantum physics. So maybe we can go further from here and look into this
certainly.
just matter.
One of the great problems of our digital age is thinking in black and white dichotomies. This people talk of spirit and matter, or consciousness and the body, and however you like to put it, and it's not that consciousness or spirit, if you like, in broad terms, it doesn't express in matter, it expresses as matter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
take E equals mc squared. Energy doesn't express in matter, energy expresses as matter. They're
Mm-hmm.
part of the same spectrum, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So even at the most, I hardly call it basic, but profound scientific level, how
Mm-hmm.
can you say just matter?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What about energy? So energy expresses as matter, and matter presents the as energy,
Mm-hmm.
depending on which end of the scale you're looking at.
Mm-hmm. I really like this metaphor. We had in my university. We had the privilege to have a lecture from um, the one who
It
wrote
doesn't matter.
the one who
Just
wrote
you know.
consciousness. No, Master and His Emissary. Um,
Oh, Ian McGilchrist.
yes, Ian
Yeah,
McGilchrist.
yeah,
And
yeah.
he made a really nice, and it probably isn't his metaphor, but I really like the metaphor of, consciousness in a sense, it can be like water. Water, the same molecules can be flowing, they can be flying around um, in, well, they can be so hard you can hit your leg against it and break it, right? It can be ice, but it can be flowing, and
Yeah.
it can go through
Now that,
everything.
yes,
So.
that is an ancient metaphor used
Mhm.
by a lot of great writers, and it also is used to explain the death process. That um, whether you are the physical body or after you die, it is still the H2O. The
Mhm.
H2O can express as ice, water, steam, superheated steam, but it's still H2O.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it's not only a useful metaphor, it's a fact almost.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and
Yeah,
exactly the same could be with consciousness, that consciousness can
yeah.
express as matter, as something like totally. And when I was reading your book, I had this really lovely like vision that perhaps when energy, like let's say when energy expresses itself in matter, or as matter, sorry,
Yeah.
perhaps it's when we think of light, it's a ray of light, going from one point to
Yeah.
another, so to say. But perhaps this speed of this ray, or this impulse of the ray, when you give it a twist, when you put into a spiral, it can take a location, it can start
Mm.
being localized, and perhaps take a form as well, when this
Mm.
ray of light starts going around itself instead of going from one place to another. And I was thinking
Mm-hmm.
the same of perhaps with consciousness, that there is this, I don't know, Christian notion, and maybe even older, that we are all the a little ray of God, this
Yeah.
little sparkle of God. Perhaps
Mm.
in this sense, we are also kind of like a ray of light, but perhaps we just have a stronger um, impulse behind us, so we can spin for longer than matter, for example, as a soul, perhaps.
Mm.
I had these visions in my mind
Well,
reading that book.
light, intelligence, spirituality are all not the same, but they're all connected.
Mm-hmm.
And the array of God, I mean, if you think from the Eastern philosophy, you have Brahma and Atma,
Mm-hmm.
the spark or ray, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
of the Godhead. So the wonderful thing about the perennial philosophy is the absolute unity of their message,
Mm-hmm.
even though it comes from so many different cultures, so many different epochs, because they dip the pen into the same inkwell.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And why are scientists so fascinated with light? Do people not ask that question? The properties of light, I mean, start from Euler and Newton and Bernoulli and all of them, but even modern scientists, the most atheistic, the ultra atheistic scientists, why are they fascinated with light? Because light, unbeknown to them, is really that spark, and light is that which conveys intelligence. So whether it's the two-hole experiment or all the experiments in quantum physics that involve light, of course, Einstein's tremendous forays into light and the photoelectric effect, scientists are fascinated by light. Why?
Yeah, because it's somewhere on the limit, or like somewhere in between matter and mind, I would say.
Yeah.
Or it can be
Yes,
both.
yes. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, what have been, well, there probably have been many, right? But what have been your guiding questions that have, brought you into this material and through it?
Sorry, Rima, not quite clear. What have been my
Questions.
guiding questions?
Yes. Well, for example, like, a question that leads people into spirituality often is, who am I, or who could I be, or who should I be, right? And
Oh, yeah, okay. Yes, I see what you're getting at. One of the guiding questions or objectives, so to speak, is to show how the perennial philosophy, or to be more specific, occult science, resolves so many of the conundrums in materialistic science, and to show how science is the best ally of the ancient wisdom, enlightened science. And the other one, you just said, who am I? That one can keep asking that every day forevermore and get deeper and deeper questions. It's not good enough to say, I'm not the body, I'm spirit. I mean, that's just words. But truly to come to an understanding of that, it takes, many lifetimes. But ultimately, one is really unpeeling the conceptual layers of thought and really getting to the core, which is really, I am an aspect of the divine consciousness, and that's not trying to sound terribly grandiose. Not only I, every particle.
Yeah,
every particle, every creature.
I really like these often indigenous views and cosmologies in which we are viewed as a dancer. For example, we are this dance of the universe, this dance of the energy of the sun with the matter of the earth, for example.
The Dancing Woolly Masters is a wonderful book, isn't it? Yes. Yeah, it is a play, a dance.
And especially in modern times, I feel that, or at least perhaps again, the gap between, soul and matter is diminishing, or matter is coming closer to people. Whether you are a believer in AI or technology, I'm definitely an enthusiast, and I think every man kind of is. But one way I like to, at least optimistically, look at this is that our imagination is coming, or let's say the ability to realize our imaginations is getting more and more powerful and more like quicker, let's say. And in this way, I feel that we are also coming closer and closer to the essence of matter. And one of my, let's say, like big paranormal experiences has been telekinesis. Not to not because I could move an object with my mind, so to say. We actually move it with our hearts in that discipline. But because that made me realize that, I am more than my body, or this world is much more mysterious, and there is a much smaller gap between me and this physical universe than we are taught, in schools at least, or through the television. And that it is possible to dance with the matter much more intimately, or with the universe, let's say, or with what is outside of me, than we are taught in schools.
Than we're taught in schools, yes. And this is where, Remo, the poets, the great mystical writers, have contributed so much. I think, as Keats said, the poets are the legislators of the human race, because what they have visioned, they put into their poetry, and they've been, so to speak, the legislators of the human race to set the thought pattern. I mean, Robert Browning talking of three souls in one soul. It's so important, in my opinion, to expose oneself to great poetry, great literature, and great music, along with great science.
Yes, I agree. And I would even say the same for spirituality. I see people with the same question of who am I, wandering into spirituality and getting lost in the, in the world of the visions and the world of the, peak experiences, and, thinking that this is all it is about, that, we kind of need to get outside of this body and into the, heavenly colors, and for, this life being kind of planned. But what I really respect about great, mystics and scientists alike, and implicitly about you as well, is exactly that. I think the greatest of men have this balance between life and the afterlife, let's say, or balance between, the worldly and otherworldly, or perennial and timely. The balance between arts and life and spirituality. I think it's really important, and I think it's actually a lot closer to truth than just pure, mystical experience. Although that sounds paradoxical, right?
Yes, I absolutely, very well put, Remo. I think in the proem of the book, and I love the word proem, which means forward, but it sounds like poem. But proem, it's more poetic. I've actually said, look, the three types of reader. I mean, if you're just a hard atheist, you think it's only matter, well, please put the book down. And you probably have done that already. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. If you think we're just spirit and nothing else, sorry, the book's not for you. But if you are questioning your place on this physical earth and see the need to harness spirituality and balance that with life on earth, then you may like to read further. So I'm reminded of the story of the great sage of Miletus, who was discoursing to his disciples about the heavens and the stars, a great speech, and he fell into a ditch and got thoroughly muddy and soaked in mud. And he realized, he said, you can talk about the heavens, but never forget where your feet are. And getting that balance is easy to talk about. It's no small matter. And I use the word matter now. It's again, it's no small matter to get that balance right in your life, because the balance shifts as you grow older, as you grow hopefully wiser, and as more things come your way.
Yeah.
But never forgetting that your feet are on earth.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
the electrical analogies, you have an open circuit, but no, that doesn't convey the current. You've got to close the circuit. So then there's a flow.
Mm-hmm.
So intuitions have got to be earthed. What do I mean earthed? It means intuitions which only stay with you are great, but you must share it. How do you share it? Through a mathematical idiom, through an experimental, through literature, through something. So that earthing quality is using matter in the philosophical sense, in the best possible sense, using matter as the expression and the vehicle of the content of the indwelling spirit. And this is what the great and legendary Newton did. His tremendous intuitions, he is one of the greatest mystics, but he harnessed his mysticism through mathematics and through experiments so that we could all read it. Otherwise, it would just be with Newton. And similarly with all the other great scientists.
Yes, and for me, let's say in life, I like to think that we are here. That in self, the fact in itself that I am and I am embodied and I am in life is an answer, like what to seek, or it gives me a balance itself. That I am here. I have. There's a reason probably why I'm here. Otherwise, if it was all about the afterlife, then I wouldn't have come here.
There's a very good reason why you're here, which only you will discover or know.
Yeah, and I think a great inspiration, a great guide is also joy. I think life gives you
Yes.
joy when you have a correct relationship, or when you relate correctly to it. You get joy.
And I really like the fact that you use the word joy and not pleasure, because they're quite different. Yeah. Joy, yes. Sometimes not pleasure because it's damn hard work.
Yeah, of course, of course. And one analogy I'd like to bring here is well, dance also, but also music. I think the greatest mystery is not even in the not in subjective world or objective world, but in between them. This is where the dance happens. When when your attention is only on yourself, you're not going to dance very well. And when your attention is only on the partner, you're not going to dance very well. It has to be somewhere between. And I think it's the same in music. At the beginning, you have to focus on yourself, to get your instrument, to get your notes right, to get your beat right, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
Then you'll, focus on the other players in the band or in the orchestra to get the sense of the whole thing. But then when you master both of these, then you can start to listen to what happens between or what happens in the room. And then this melody, starts to live on its own and starts to guide you. At first it's like, I think it's the same in entrepreneurship. Whenever you create a company or a project, at first you have to put a lot of energy into it and guide it and grow it, like children. But then they start to live the life on their own, and then they start to carry you or guide you or play with you.
Rima, what you've said is music to my ears. Because music has been my absolute guiding beacon. And in front of me, just in front of my desk, well, earlier we were talking about a screen sort of background, and the background I have is my beautiful Steinway piano, which is next door. But in front of me, I have this quotation from
Beethoven.
And it says, "He is only and solely of himself, and to this only one all things owe their existence." Now, there have been different translations from the German, but Beethoven kept this inscription framed and under glass, always before him on his writing table.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I make the point very strongly that the greatest scientists, greatest musicians, poets, artists have all drawn their inspiration from one source.
Mm-hmm. It's a great love story, is what I get from it.
So music has been absolutely central, and people now talk about a sort of a sudden awakening, a sudden near-death experience. You don't have to have a near-death experience. I mean, good for you if you have, but you're no lesser a person if you've not had a near-death experience.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say I've had inspiration right throughout my life, ever since listening to music, well, even before the age of 1, but going to concerts and listening to the greatest of artists right throughout my life.
Yeah, and
And
my
playing the piano myself.
mm-hmm. Also my, like, a lot of the magic I've experienced has been in through jamming. I haven't, been a great musician, but I have played drums a bit.
Yeah,
I have had the honor to play
you mentioned
in
that
band.
last time. Yeah,
Yeah, and the greatest time I've had is when I totally lose myself in the music. This is exactly what I said. When you create something and suddenly it starts to carry you. Suddenly
you
you're
lose
enveloped in
yourself
it.
when you mastered the technique. So when the material has been mastered, then you can really lose yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's I think one of the greatest joys, and I think one of the biggest motivations and inspirations for people. When I look at any kind of great people, they are often, being carried by it, or chasing or
Mm.
looking or playing with this
Mm.
force, or sometimes called flow nowadays.
Mm. Yeah, they call it flow. That's fine. I'm happy with that.
Mm-hmm.
Fluid dynamics.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I wanted
I've
to.
studied flow in engineering for many, many years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's part of the physical aspect of flow, of course.
Mm-hmm. Did you experience flow while engineering or working in engineering?
Um, I, gosh, not to the extent that I have done when writing or playing the piano. No, not to the same extent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But there certainly were moments of mini revelations, if I can put it that way without sounding boastful, when you realize that where did that come from? And it only came because I was not egoistically, of course, engaging with the subject or intellectually. I was just in the flow.
Mm-hmm. 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 One one point I wanted to kind of bring in and maybe perhaps ask about also is, I think that materialism itself, isn't
Mm.
bad necessarily. Like you said, science is the greatest ally for this wisdom. Mm, but what I think is perhaps detrimental is reductionism, and kind of forgetfulness of how deep the mystery really is, and kind of this notion that we know it, or we know it all, or we have made it. And I think it's
Yeah.
the same in spirituality. Like in science it's reductionism, but I think in spirituality the same term is new age,
Yeah,
and
you're right. Yeah.
yeah, and in the same sense, like new age, I also have some respect for it, because new age has brought this massive wisdom and awakening to everyday people, on a massive scale. but then again, it's so diluted. It's so
Diluted.
diminished.
That's right.
Yeah.
Polluted, diluted. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, materialism in its place is a savior. I never fail to point out that when I was 14, 15, my eyesight in both eyes was saved not by homeopathy or acupuncture or spirituality, but by Western science, material science. And in those days, in the 60s, corneal surgery, it was a very dicey affair. You know, eye surgery was done with Gillette blades. If you just imagine Gillette blades that you shave with but now, of course, surgery is done with lasers at literally the molecular level. Well, I didn't need surgery, thank goodness, but it was material science that saved my eyesight. But also, it was literally the material science of gas permeable lenses, the material of which the lenses are made, that allows the lens to be permeable so the oxygen can get. So materialism in its place is a savior. But when it's taken to extremes, it gets ridiculous. So if I give you a very, very quick example, the trouble, Remo, with all this arguing and fighting in science is a confusion of levels and a confusion of categories. Levels and categories. So we give you a quick example. I like to go running around my local lake every day. It's not my lake. It's a fishing lake. And there's a playground, and you see these little children playing. And to see pure joy, really, before all of that playing and social media and you just see pure joy. And say a little child comes down a slide. They've got slides and swings and knocks his teeth out. And the slide's too steep. The slide manufacturer, when he designs or redesigns the slide, he's not interested in whether it was a child or a piece of wood. Physics, it's just a translation from potential energy to kinetic energy. So it could be 3-stone child, 3-stone piece of wood coming down. The angle's got to be the same. Now, physics, the child goes to a dentist. The dentist is not going to ask the child, what's your weight? The weight is very important to the slide manufacturer. If you've got 1 ton coming down, it's a different slide than if you've got a little child coming down. The dentist is not interested in the weight, different category. For the dentist, the child really for his job is an object. Teeth, it's an object. He's not interested in the soul and the spirit of the child for his job. Then the child, as a grown-up lady, goes to a psychiatrist for a horrible experience as a result of the childhood accident. Is the psychiatrist going to say, what's your weight when you were a young girl? No, the psychiatrist is only interested in the inner person, the soul and the spirit. So to look at the inner soul and spirit from the physics point of view is completely to ask the wrong question, and it's a different category. It's a different level. So what applies to the slide manufacturer, physics, and to the dentist and to the psychiatrist, they're asking different questions, different categories, different levels. So when people think more carefully about their questions and what levels, it would sort out a lot of the confusion about just matter.
Yeah, sophistication.
And reductionism is vital.
Yeah.
In its place, it is. But taken to extremes, it gets nonsensical. As Heisenberg put it so beautifully, by dividing matter further and further, we don't come to an ultimate particle or whatever. We reach a stage where division has no meaning.
Yeah, just to re-emphasize the same point, it's like, when a doctor is operating, they kind of need to be totally reductionistic. They need to reduce like everything but this action or this location they're working on. Otherwise, they wouldn't be performing their job very well. And I guess Ian McGilchrist brings home this point also, that we do have very different brain hemispheres and two very different modes of thinking. One being like a holistic thinking, thinking in the whole picture kind of, and in images, and another being this very focused thinking. And perhaps like in our scientific discourse and even political discourse, this is what has been mixed up. These two very different modes of thinking.
Yes, it has. Yes.
Are reduced to each other, right?
And
or used
that's
in wrong
the
places.
danger of specialism, where one is so specialized and focused, one thinks that's the only way it is.
Yeah. So we're kind of back to the problem of like disconnection or disunity. Or hyper specialization.
Yeah.
What do you think, by the way, are like these main challenges we are facing today as humans, as individuals, as society?
Oh, the main challenge is the lack of truth. Truth now doesn't mean much to people because of social media. I mean, everything has its benefits and disadvantages, but and now one can chat. GPT is the latest chatbot, and you can ask it to spew out anything. Virtual reality has its place, of course, but in the wrong hands and with the wrong people, it really is a step in the direction of complete delusion. Where am I? What sort of reality am I in? What is the truth? So I think we're facing a crisis of truth. That is the main challenge. And technology is behind it, or rather the misuse and overuse of technology. So the challenge in my view is not so much materialism or lack of it, but it's the blurring of people's ability to be quiet and to go deeply into a matter, because they're kicked around by all sorts of extraneous forces, all competing for attention. You got this on the internet and you got this on YouTube. You got information, misinformation, fake news.
Overstimulation.
Yeah, it's a crisis of truth, in my understanding. Realizing that wisdom has nothing to do with piling fact upon fact like bricks, one brick on top of another. It's really paring away the intellectual concepts to arrive at the core. So the wisest people are not the most informed people, and the most informed people are anything but wise.
And what are your well, I guess you have been living a solution, but what would your solution be for that problem?
What, the lack of truth?
Yes.
Well, one thing is I don't have a television.
Same.
I never have. And if I could boast about only one thing in my life, it's that I've never had one. I've never felt the need for one, and I don't want one. Well, I like to think I'm pretty well informed, but I read. And when you read, it's a very different thing from having news just dumped into you, so-called news. So my solution is only my solution. It can't be for anyone else. But as a general principle, I would say reduce the amount of trash in your life. no one would argue that if you eat junk food, you're not going to be healthy. I mean, no one's going to argue about that. It is so important to realize that there is the mental equivalent of junk food. Don't fill your mind with junk. Now, the sale of my book is in double figures. A certain gentleman living in the United States, on the first day of his book, it sold 400,000 copies. So if you want to read trash and vulgarity, don't expect to grow healthy in your mind. Don't expect to receive deep thoughts about the ancient wisdom any more than if you eat junk food, you would expect to have a healthy body. So choose what goes in through there and what goes in through there. So you ask, my solution is literally to be very careful about what I mentally eat, emotionally eat.
So what you compose yourself out of, kind of. Yeah.
And you know the gentleman I'm referring to, of course.
No. Do you have to name?
Whose book sold 400,000 copies on the first day? Prince Harry. Well, if you want to read people hanging their dirty washing out on a washing line, and fine, but then you'll stay at that level. Don't complain.
Yeah, I think two important tasks for us, one relating to spirituality is to strip away, like you said, the information, to strip away these layers and to really arrive at this perennial truth, of who we are and what is really, what really matters and what's the essence of our being. And I think in nowadays world, more and more, and I also do think that this is one of the reasons that we have developed these strong egos, is that we need a really strong filter nowadays to filter out all that trash and all that junk food, both material and both intellectually also, and even by people, by these different relations. We need these strong filters. So I'm a strong advocate of, we need to expand our egos and we need to also look behind our egos, but we certainly, mustn't get rid of them because we wouldn't be able to function.
You're absolutely right. This is where language gets in the way, and people say you got to be egoless. That's nonsense. Without an ego, you wouldn't do anything on earth. It's whether your ego is your servant or your master, and it's as simple as that. Are you using your ego, in other words, your psychophysical being and your ordinary thoughts and emotions? Are you using that as a vehicle, as a channel to enhance, to promulgate what you want to say, or is it just blocking you and becoming the be-all and end-all? And the finest example is Beethoven in his early days before his deafness. My gosh, he had a powerful ego, and and arrogant with it as well. But then, through suffering, he turned his ego around completely to serve the music. So you need an ego.
Yep. Yeah. And especially today, when there is so much overstimulation and so much information, radiated, we're walking in big microwave ovens, being radiated all the time.
Well, you say that, but there is a heck of a lot of truth there, Rima. And we are working in microwave ovens, and I'm not at all convinced that 5G and all is not harmful, because we need to realize our sensitivities vary enormously. If you think of an allergy, I know someone, I mean, if you're allergic to something, you've only got to touch it and you burst out in sores or allergy or whatever. Some people are far more sensitive
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
radiation than others. And I know personally people who are sensitive. I know someone personally who went to view a house and he felt peculiar because just behind the corner, the wall, there was a smart meter and a smart meter emitting microwaves. And you cannot say, oh, well, that's placebo and rubbish. You saw it, and therefore you made yourself
Mm-hmm.
think like that. He didn't see it first, he felt it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So radiation is something that is not given enough attention. And of course it won't be because there's big money there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm not unconvinced. I've got no way of proving it. I'm not unconvinced that viruses, I'm not just thinking of COVID, but viruses are not stimulated by radiative fields
Mm.
acting like amniotic fluid. So I'm not saying the radiation causes the virus, but just like in the womb, you have the amniotic fluid, the
Mm.
conditions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not unconvinced that radiation may not be the amniotic fluid for certain kinds of viruses.
So it's kind of mutating or stimulating perhaps these very
Perhaps.
minute
And,
organisms.
and that will never be given attention in science
Mm-hmm.
because you're going to get the big manufacturers say, "Oh, we've done all the tests and all," and when there's money, follow the money trail. No
Mm-hmm.
test is going to be objective.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, me too
But we are
personally.
living
I'm
in the microwaves. Yes, yeah.
I'm also
And you
somewhere.
feel that when you go to the airport. When I go to the airport, well, why does one feel more tired? Not because you're
Mm-hmm.
stressed and I'm on time. I've checked in. Everything's fine. I'm just more tired. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the airport is full of radiation.
Yeah, and the same in malls. Personally, I
Oh
find it
God,
really hard to go, to malls.
yeah, malls, but not only radiation, but human chaotic thought.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Human thought. People thinking, "I want to buy this, I want to buy that," and unfocused thoughts. Where if you
Mm-hmm.
go to the concert hall,
Mm-hmm.
you're not depleted, you're energized because everyone's thoughts
Mm-hmm.
are focused.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, so different fields, totally different fields.
Different, different mental fields.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and on the technological aspect, I feel I'm also somewhere like in between. A part of me is really optimistic because, more and more I get like these work and, positive
Mm.
impact opportunities through the internet, through my computer. I really love the chance to talk with you, over
Mm.
these
Same
hundreds of
here.
kilometers
Mm.
and, and make
Yeah.
positive change also, to get the truth out there.
Mm.
At the same time, I do also, personally realize and feel and see also, other people suffering from the lack of connection with nature.
Yes, yes.
To
Lack
be
of connection with nature, lack of connection with their fellow human beings.
yes, yes. And I think this is also a fundamental, let's say, challenge we are facing today as humans, like how to again how to not be servants to the technology but the other way around,
Mm.
how to master these tools and not be
Mm.
tools to the tools.
Yeah,
Yes,
indeed.
indeed. So we have reached the hour. What about your time requirements? Would you like to finish now or do you have maybe another 10 minutes?
Yeah, yeah, with pleasure.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, because I wanted to, delve a little bit deeper into your inspiration. I know we have talked about, science and perennial philosophy and also, arts. Uh,
Mm.
But maybe you have like some concrete examples of who have, most stimulated your thought or inspired you
Oh,
in
yes,
writing these
most
books.
certainly.
Mm-hmm.
Most certainly. Well, and also, it's important to recognize the anti-stimulation. I'll tell you what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
When I was, I don't know, 14 or 15, I was reading these books on biology that, we've come for the monkeys, and by Dr. Desmond Morris, then, who was quite well known on children's program on television. Now, I was 14. Not, I mean, I said I don't have a television. My parents had it, watched it now and then. So the point is this. I was reading these books on biology, how we came from the monkeys, and then it meant a lot to me. And I mean this sincerely. But then I started questioning this. No, my 14-year-old mind said, yeah, very good. But moving on, I thought there's far more to it. So that's what I would call the
Mm-hmm.
anti-inspiration.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So then, of course, when I came to at Sussex, at Imperial, I didn't do much philosophical reading. It was heavy going. I did a lot of gliding and flying and piano playing. But at Sussex, I spent a lot of time reading the complete works of Jung. And that, of
Mm-hmm.
course, hugely opened another vista. It's not that the men for monkeys things was rubbish. It had its place at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Like a child playing, with a toy. If I play with a toy now, you would think something's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But then in volume 4 of the book, I listed my main sources of inspiration, many, of course. One is H.P. Blavatsky,
Mm-hmm.
phenomenal occultist who brought together science, religion, and philosophy. And with thousands of references, when someone says things and references them, they're not just talking cuckoo, they are pointing to the source. Then Paul Brunton, one of the greatest sages and philosophers, then Krishnamurti, and on the science side, I would say certainly Rupert Sheldrake, who has
Mm-hmm.
shown great courage and dignity in his sincere attempts to introduce spirituality into science, if I can put it that way, or rather to undermine the completely materialistic paradigm of science.
Mm-hmm.
And Sheldrake has been attacked right, left, and center. But what I so admire about him is he maintains his own dignity. He doesn't resort to attack and expletives and abuse. He knows what he's talking about. He doesn't need to attack. When people attack you, it shows their weakness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, the other scientific inspiration, Isaac Newton's been a huge inspiration. His alchemy, his mysticism,
Mm-hmm.
his theology, and of course his science, because his science was a small part of his total output. Erwin Schrödinger is another one.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the ones. But if I had to name two people, it would be Blavatsky, Paul Brunton, and a third person would be Manly P. Hall, who wrote that incredible work, The Secret Teaching of All Ages.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the greatest joy, to use your word, is to see the thread that
Mm-hmm.
unites them into one beautiful necklace.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
So it's my absolute joy and pleasure.
Mm-hmm. One of my first, let's say,
And your inspiration?
yeah, one of my first inspirations was related to Rupert Sheldrake, who I discovered after Bruce Lipton.
Oh, right. Yes,
There,
biology of belief. Yeah.
yeah, it was one of my first like kind of half scientific, half spiritual books, and well, I started from like esoterics also, actually from occultism. My kind of like rediscovery of magic started with calling out spirits, and then at one point, well, now I know it was perhaps my unconscious moving the needle, but then at that time when I saw that, hey, I am not moving that needle, but that needle is moving, I knew that
there's more to it than meets the eye.
Yes,
Definitely.
yes.
Yeah,
and then I started reading about parapsychology and paranormal like phenomena, and yes, I think then I discovered Bruce Lipton at one point, and then I read a lot of esotericism, all about everything, chakras and auras and meditation and yoga and some religions, and actually Jnana yoga was one very very informative field. But I think it all concluded for me in discovering transpersonal psychology, which for me was like this, perfect balance between like science and articulation and like quite clear wording, and also like these, giving respect to the perennial philosophy and all these deeper truths and the mystery.
And giving respect to the personal, even though it's transpersonal.
Yes, as well. Yes, exactly. Finding this balance, and there I started with Stanislav Grof, and then Ken Wilber was a kind of a
Ken Wilber is yes,
Bible for me.
Ken Wilber, Quantum Questions. Excellent book.
Yeah, he was a big inspiration for me for a long time, and I think I've walked a few steps further than Wilber now in studying transpersonal psychology. But if I had to name also a few greatest writers or books that have changed me, Ken Wilber is definitely like first of them. Yeah, he also, like you said, like he, through his writing, I found this this thread that kind of connects everything.
But as you said, if Wilbur opened up things for you, it was already in you, and what was implicit was made explicit.
Yes.
So he unlocked what was implicit.
Yes, and now, like right now, or like let's say the last 4 years, maybe one of my greatest influences has been Dr. Jordan Peterson.
Right.
He's, especially as a speaker, I love his ideas, I love his thinking, but what I most love about him is the way he can articulate very very deep ideas in very very simple language, and show you exactly like how he arrives at these conclusions, like the whole pattern of thought, the whole train of thought, and take you through it.
Jordan Peterson.
Yes.
Right.
He's a psychologist, but he's also an admirer of Jung and mysteries, I would say. But he also manages to to convey an amazing amount of truth and wisdom without ever stepping into metaphysics. And he doesn't denigrate metaphysics. He just, when he speaks, he speaks from his position of his training, which is psychology.
That's fair enough.
Yeah.
You said a very important thing, not to denigrate, but to speak from your position. And when I hear Western doctors denigrating homeopathy without knowing the first thing about it, I say just speak from where you are. If you haven't researched and read, fine, then you're not in a position to denigrate.
Yeah, I think this also shows a kind of fear and arrogance of
arrogance, pride.
Of individual people, but also of, I would say, society or the times we live in. Coming back to this like overstimulation of information. It just you either stay humble or you have to start like very strongly filtering out. and of course there's always personal reasons for that, you know. But I guess it's also like a reductionistic approach to take to start attacking and very strongly filtering out these anomalous, let's say, fields that that go against materialist paradigm or the main paradigm.
Indeed. And the age-old simile of Plato's cave applies ever more strongly, where the prisoners in the cave mistake the shadows on the walls for realities, and only when one goes outside they saw the light being cast. So Plato's cave applies in all sorts of walks of life, where you think you know it all, where you only know it all because you've been in that one cave. You know, if you were born into your house and never walked outside, you think that's the world.
Yeah, it's been my experience too. You know, you can't really change people's beliefs. The only thing that can change beliefs is like, you know, direct experience.
You know, you come across the glue called araldite. I don't know, do you have that? Anyway, it's one of the hardest glues. Look, araldite, concrete, cement. There's a glue that's much more powerful than concrete, and that's known as prejudice.
Yes.
When you think in the medical profession alone, the great English surgeon William Harvey took him 20 years grudgingly to convince the medical authorities on the continent that the heart pumps blood. The heart is not a convector heater, as they thought. But it took 20 years grudgingly to accept that. The great Joseph Lister, the Victorian surgeon, he got, you know, abused for his discovery of antiseptics, even though there was ample proof in Glasgow Infirmary that using antiseptic vastly reduced in mortality, but no, egos came into play. So prejudice is the strongest glue.
Yes, and I think we should, you know, if I have to, you know, take or name the mission I have with this podcasting or my podcast, it's simply to bring people into the present moment. Not, I don't mean like spiritually, like come into the now, but I mean in terms of knowing, you know, to bring people here and to stop fighting with the shadows of the past, to simply like try to grasp where we are actually right now.
Yeah, stop fighting with the conceptual shadows. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. All right. Well, if we start trying to tie this conversation to its end, I'd like to ask you, how has this, you know, journey been for you of writing these books? What have you discovered and what have you experienced, you know, having done so?
Well, I'm amazed it ever got written. Did I write the book or the book write me? Sometimes I'm quite surprised that, but seriously, it shows that if you set your mind on something, you will do it. If your motive is true, if you're being insincere to yourself, it'll fall apart. But the greatest sort of, how can I put it, signal that I think, I hope I was on the right track, was the amazing synchronicities that all fell in place. Because, you know, a book of that size in color, how many publishers would take that on? You know, I mean, everyone said you'd have to self-publish. So then I was giving a talk at Steiner House, and I met a wonderful polymath, Leon Conrad. I consulted him on certain editorial English matters, and he pointed me in the direction of Shepherd Walwyn, my publisher. The head of the company knew Peter Fenwick. He was well versed in this subject. He didn't need to give it to 10 people to peer review. Then my copy editor, my text editor, they were all in sync with the subject. So all of these things fell in place, which I regard as a good sign.
Yes.
So it's not so much give me the tools and I'll finish the job, but tell me what the job is and I'll find the tools and finish it.
And I'm certainly glad you did. I really look
So
forward to going through it and really diving deep with these books.
So the journey, the most stressful part of the journey, I say it unashamedly, is getting image credits. And I spent 6 months on that. And that was extremely frustrating, but I fully appreciate in this highly litigious world, my extremely naive cavalier approach is if you want to take anything from my book, take it, just reference it. Finished. I'm happy. You don't have to run it past me. Say where you got it from, reference it. But no, you can't do that, of course, with images. So that was a very stressful, frustrating, and time wasting because I could have been doing more writing. But like bringing up a child, there's the element of joy, I hope. When you give birth, it's hard work and labor. When you bring up the child, it's hard work and labor, but there is always joy at the end. So that was the journey.
But
will continue.
Yes, exactly. I wanted to also ask, are there any future projects on your horizon now too?
Certainly. No, it's implicit coming back to our this whole massive question of good and evil, which cannot be approached from a dualistic point of view. There is so much one can say and invoke this whole subject of karma. So it is that theme in general. I wouldn't say it's a future project yet, but it's what I'm working on now. And then at the more consciousness level, to show more deeply the evolution of the human being and the relationship between the mind of man. I use the word man as human, of course, not man-woman. The mind of man and the higher beings that have made this happen. Known in Sanskrit as the Manasaputras, the sons of mind, the Agnishvatas, and the Kumaras.
Could it be like archetypes?
Yes, okay, in one sense. Very well. Yes. Archetypes that have projected and beamed their rays, so to speak, into the nascent early human race.
I want to also ask you, have you by any chance, I don't know, talked or read Christopher M. Beja's book?
Yeah, go on.
Well, he has many actually, but what I've read is the LSD and the Mind of the Universe, which he coined actually Diamonds from Above. Yes?
Yes. Look, I've written rather heavily on this whole subject of psychedelic drugs in volume 3. I'm well aware of Christopher Beja's and Stanislav Grof's work, and they're well known in the scientific medical network. I'm not for psychedelics. For me, it is cheating. Now, let me be clear. To shift depression or for medical purposes, by all means, psychedelics or whatever helps, but not like, let's go to the pub and instead of having beer, let's have some psychedelic. Cheers, and let's talk about our experience, If I burst, forget cyber attacks, good old days, good old days, if I burst into a bank and get £1 million, I have not earned it. I've just got it. There is an old saying in Buddhism, it's not steal, do not take what is not yours. It's not the same as stealing.
Yeah, I think this is what Jung also
my
said.
dream would be to play in London's Royal Festival Hall, give a piano recital. I have to deserve to be there. I could burst in and hit the piano. I'm not playing the piano in the Royal Festival Hall. That's cheating. So psychedelics for me is cheating. And also, there are huge dangers which people are unaware of. The effect on the pineal and the pituitary. And
this is something I haven't heard about, actually.
well, the way psychedelics disorganize, so to speak, the aura around the pineal and the pituitary, and you won't find this in other than real books on occult science. But as with anything, when you exit your physical body, you can't take your drugs with you. You can only take what you have earned and deserved. So, okay, take a drug if you must. And I'm not, by all means, don't think I'm looking down on people who have. I'm just pointing out the dangers. And if you keep doing it, the inner deterioration will be inevitable because you keep relying on that.
Yeah.
Why not listen to great music and great Schubert and great Mozart? You get all the inspiration or whatever works for you in music, whatever works. You get all the experience with none of the ghastly side effects.
Yeah, exactly. Especially, I'd agree with these, let's say, not just the negative effects, but the positive effects that like weren't had or were thrown away. You know, chasing these easier shortcut paths.
But also with a drug, you will glimpse higher vistas, you will glimpse other dimensions, but that's no indication of spirituality. Why should it be? If I go on a helicopter and visit not the helicopter would go there, but the top of Mount Everest, yes, I will see it, but I haven't climbed it. I'm no more spiritual having taken a drug and experienced something. There are many drugs that are not drug related.
Yeah. Why I asked and why it reminded me of Beige was this you know, these bigger forces or these other beings that also, you know, affect us or have an effect, and these visions are very interesting.
And when you take a drug, you disorganize the protective web so that the other beings can infiltrate. And it's usually not the good beings, it's the not so good beings who can infiltrate. Hence the greater propensity to possession.
Well, this I have actually also seen.
And psychic attack.
Yeah, that's a big topic. Well, let's tie this conversation up then. It's been 1.5 hours already, which hasn't definitely felt like that.
No, definitely not. Time is very relative. You know what Einstein, how he so beautifully explained relativity, that if a man sits on a hot stove, 1 minute seems like 1 hour, And if a man talks to a pretty girl, 1 hour seems like 1 minute. Well, 1.5 hours felt like 1 minute. I'm not saying I'm talking to a pretty girl, but I'm talking to someone who was highly engaging
Yes.
and a pleasure and a joy to be with.
Thank you. Thank you. I've learned a lot, and I
Well, thank
definitely
you,
want to look into your writings deeper.
Thank you. So, what's your journey now with the Aleph Trust? You're on the 2nd year, you said.
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
I am right now I'm writing the finishing essay for my transpersonal psychology course. We are
Wonderful.
having a little practice research design, and then it will be my thesis. And
Wonderful.
and currently
Which will be publicly available.
I am planning to research right now, at least, the transformative effect of telekinesis, because I know a network
wonderful.
I know I have access to a network of people who have accomplished telekinesis. So
you know the Galileo book, Spiritual Awakenings. I think there are a couple of examples of telekinesis there.
Yeah, I will definitely need to do a literature review anyway and look deeper into it, because personally it affected me quite a lot, and not the especially not the parapsychological or metaphysical questions. You know, these you can deduce yourself from the work, but what I'm interested in really is the transformative power of it. And you know, again, you don't need psychedelics to achieve it. You just need an hour or two of like real focus and some openness.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
No, that's great. So you've got a definite purpose and an enthusiasm for this thing. So that's wonderful news, Remo. All the best.
Thank you. And to you, Eddie.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, thank you. And be in touch.
Yes.
Lovely connecting. Thanks to Zoom and technology.
Exactly. And thanks to all our listeners also. I hope you continue to stay in tune.